Kal Anfuk Yasharim Kal Mamin Bartam, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, I'm sure everyone knows this already, but it's a Saudi Arabic phrase for I said, "Come on, Sharim, blow," and he said, "I don't have any lips."
Okay. I thought you were just being the Kwisatz Haderach or something. You know, I thought that was Fremen for Hugh controls the spice, controls Dune or something. Maybe that's just because I have it on the mind, but
it does sound like it's a reference from something, though. What's that? What is that from? That sounds like the punchline to like a vaudeville act.
It does. Well, it's an idiomatic expression, meaning someone has asked you to help, but you can't. And I imagine Christian Horner has asked for a lot of help lately, but the number of people who can give it to him is running out. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
Oh my God, I've cleared my evening. I was going to go to the opera. I was going to spend some time with some old friends, but no, I had to cancel this, make sure we had the requisite 6 hours to talk about everything F1 today, which honestly, if you had asked me, if I was only thinking about the race, I would have been like, we can get this one over probably pretty quickly. But the F1 gods have really conspired to throw the strangest news story maybe ever in the history of our podcast right on our laps. So there's plenty to dig into.
Also joining us to help us untangle this mess is Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Eager to get into it. There's a positive banquet that we're going to be sitting down to. A banquet of shit. But nevertheless, we're going to eat it.
If you're new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where we release every week an ad-free version of the podcast, along with bonus podcasts every month and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on this month, Danny?
We just recorded this month's patron exclusive podcast. It's the first 5 episodes of Drive to Survive season 6, which I think across the board people seem to be really enjoying. A great return to form for that series. We will be recording, putting that one up in, I don't know, maybe a week or so, and then we're going to have 5 through 10 on next month. But of course, you can access all of our Patreon exclusive podcasts, including the Ferrari review we did last month, and years and years of Patreon exclusive episodes prior to that over at patreon.com/shiftf1. And a massive thanks to all of our incredible title sponsors: Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphus Training, Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, App Analytics Telemetry Deck TDF1 Team, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Al-Thani, MasterCard Venmo, JC Racing Stick, F1 Team Punch. I'm going to have to put like a character limit on this thing. Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, Yabs, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Valtar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Romph, Irvine, Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, and of course, Jason Kelly. Thank you all so much for your support during this troubling time. Not for us, though, for Christian Horner, and for, certainly, I guess, a lot of people actually surrounding him.
Well, yeah, I mean, always a fun time to go to the first qualifying session of the year. It's been 3 months since we had one. There's all this conjecture over, what does testing really mean? Have people made big gains? Is it just going to be the same as last year? What's going to happen? All the stops get pulled out in qualifying. All the cards are laid on the table. Various multipliers are applied if you have the right jokers. And then we see what happens,
have you
been
playing Balatro?
I don't know what you mean.
Just a poker fiend?
Maybe a little bit.
Okay.
So here's how it went. Max Verstappen got pole position.
Yeah. I watched practice. I watched because it was weird this week, right? Because of what was it, Ramadan? I forget.
Ramadan, yeah.
It was, yeah. So everything got pushed a day early, so it was very strange to wake up on.
It'll be like that this weekend, I believe.
It will, like, of course, right? Yeah. So qualifying was on like a Friday afternoon. It was very peculiar, but I watched everything prior to it. It was like that thing we were looking during testing, and you're like trying to eke out like, where is everyone? Where is I would say, unfortunately, maybe for some of the predictions people had, like it kind of shook out the way everyone thought it was gonna shake out. In the end, there was a couple of moments there. You had a Hulkenberg doing well, which of course was reminiscent from last year as well.
Right.
But yeah, with practice and quality, it felt fairly in line with what we were thinking.
I would say coming out of preseason testing, we flagged this. A lot of people did. Alpine did not look good. They did not look like they were ready for the race season to begin. And there was some question, like, they didn't also, it wasn't a great showing. Maybe they didn't get enough runtime. We'll see. They finished like pretty much dead last. What was it, 18th, 19th in qualifying?
19th and 20th in qualifying.
19th and 20th, nobody below them. Not where you want to be if you're ostensibly a manufacturer F1 entrant.
Yeah, well, I'll run down the list here. I'd say there are a few kind of surprise. Well, a few like we'll have to see how this shakes out in the race sort of results. But in second place on the first row, next to Max Verstappen, we've got Charles Leclerc, followed by George Russell, then Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez in fifth, Fernando Alonso in sixth, set his time in Q3 as the only car on track, which I thought was interesting. He waited for everybody else to go out and do their thing, and then he just headed the track all to himself. He's the only driver to have raced at the first Bahrain GP in 2004 and is still in the sport. Lando Norris will line up seventh, followed by his teammate Oscar Piastri. Lewis Hamilton, the other Mercedes, down in ninth. He said after the session that he sacrificed qualifying performance for a better race setup. He and George apparently kind of diverged in their philosophies. But yeah, that is one of those things that only the race will tell. So that was interesting to watch. Nico Hulkenberg, as you mentioned, got into Q3. He'll start 10th. And again, like you said, Danny, this was sort of Haas's. This happened a lot last year, and then they just plummeted through the field. So will that happen again? Yuki Tsunoda will line up 11th, followed by Lance Stroll, Alex Albon, Daniel Ricciardo.
He's getting choked up. I know. It's so great to see him. You're right. I know. It's so emotional really. Seeing him in a car. It's terrific.
He did the quickest lap of free practice one.
Right.
So that just kind of shows you can't really judge much by practice always. Kevin Magnussen, 15th, followed by Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Logan Sargent, and then the two Alpines of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, who I will say Esteban Ocon only missed out on, 15th place was a 30.5. He did a 30.7. And then Gasly did a 30.9. So it's not like they're seconds off the pace, but they are they're in last. The last time that this team started from the back row, Julian Palmer was racing for the team, which was pretty funny for the F1 TV broadcast to bring up because he's a member of it. But yeah, that's how the race started. Danny, do you want to take us through it?
Yeah, I guess the start of the race. I'm trying to think of what happened interesting at the front. There was a bit of action between Leclerc and Verstappen. I think by the time they exited turn one, it was pretty much over. But it's a relatively short run down to that first turn for F1 track standards. The battle, the main incident behind all of what happened at the start was sort of like a Hulkenberg stuck in the middle of a sandwich between Bottas and Stroll, right? Wasn't it Stroll who got spun around? Yeah.
I think saying he was stuck in the sandwich is being generous to him, unfortunately. He
thinks
dropped
so?
was he places off the start. He just didn't get any sort of exit off the line. He's starting 10th before he hits turn one. He is down in, I think 12th is where timing and scoring had him, but it was a traffic jam. But the problem is Stroll whipped right past him. And it's the corner is a wedge, a funnel. and Hulkenberg just didn't back out of it. You know how like anyone who's played a racing game, the accordion effect of all the cars slowing to make the first corner is really dramatic. Like it can really catch you out. It's a bit like on the highway when you're late to realize there's a backup on a ramp and suddenly realize like I'm slowing down. Oh, I need to be like all on the brake. It's like that. Hulkenberg's an experienced driver. He should have probably seen that that's where things were headed. Instead, he kind of just tries to make room by going in at the tightest part of the inside line and just gets in the back of Stroll and sort of smacks him around. Bottas is the big loser there. I think his wheel gets knocked hard in the incident, but it really does stem from Hulkenberg having a disastrous like lurch off the line. I think trying to basically fix it, but in turn one.
Yeah, he complained to his team like, "What was that wheel spin?" And then Bottas I think earned himself some front wing damage getting into the back of Hulkenberg. The other thing I think at the front is that Perez got by Sainz into fourth pretty quickly. But yeah, that's kind of lap one. Lap three, Norris gets by Alonso for sixth place, while Russell gets by Leclerc for second. In these opening laps, a lap later, the other McLaren of Piastri gets by Alonso for seventh. And a little while later on lap 7, Leclerc gets passed again, this time by Perez for third. Leclerc locking up all over the place. And we understand from the radio that he is having an issue. I have a quote from him after the race. In the first 10 laps, it was impossible. Every lap I was doing, I would brake 3 or 4 meters earlier, but the issue was getting much, much worse every lap. So every time I was basing my feeling on the previous lap, but in the meantime, the issue was a lot more. So I would get there and I would lock up like crazy again. So it felt pretty bad. Then it stabilized, but in a place that was completely out of the proper window. On the radio, the team told me that it was more than 100 degrees split between front right and front left brake temperature, and that stayed that way the whole race. So we were in a very bad place.
To be clear, folks, they're braking in straight lines largely at this track. Like this isn't tire load is not that different. Yeah, that's a wild difference. I remember they mentioned that in the commentary that the heat balance on the brakes was just completely off. That's
well, and it was pulling his car to one side. Oh. So he was saying like, I hit the brakes and my car just turns.
I thought he was going to be a DNF. Yeah. Like the brakes issue looked so bad that the car looked undrivable. I was actually kind of surprised they were able to stabilize it.
And it was early.
Finish the race.
It wasn't like one of these lap 58 problems.
Can you make it
I wonder if they can nurse it home. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be your night. The other thing, I mean, and I think that might have also, maybe it's drawing too many conclusions, but it felt like that was also the first sign that like, there's always a bit of a shakedown cruise aspect to the first race of the season. And maybe there were some heat issues and glitches happening up and down the grid. Cause one of the things that happened like also early lap 10, I think this was one of the first incidents that was in my notes after Leclerc plummeting through the field, was we see Sargent just going straight off of turn 1. And on the replay, you see that God bless night races and their incredibly razor sharp views of the steering wheels, because as Sargent goes straight off, you see suddenly he starts frantically trying to adjust the brake balance on his car, and the brake balance goes fully forward. Now, what I didn't realize was I thought he had a rear brake failure and he was trying to compensate for that. I guess what was really happening was that it just adjusted the brake balance all the way forward, and he's trying to like snap it back to being like what it should be in an F1 car, somewhere around 50-50. And so his brakes just went fully forward, and you can't really stop an F1 car, especially the end of the fastest straight. You can't just have the thing completely be like, we're only going to use the front brakes and have that work. And this car got stuck because you got a big red sign on the on the steering wheel, car too hot. And we would be seeing the car too hot sign, like notification on the Williams cars the entire night.
Yeah.
And it was not a hot night.
I want that as a Discord sticker or something for when you see a car you like.
Car too hot.
Car too hot. I have a really good quote here from James Vowles, team principal of Williams, regarding this.
He said good morning.
Issue.
Good morning.
He said good morning, and then he said, with Logan, we have an uncommanded brake bias movement all the way to the front, which is why he went off.
It's great. This is like one of those air crash reports where they're like, oh yeah, the autopilot just like, it turned on and set the trim forward and the pilot never figured it out. And,
Yeah. And as since we've watched Drive to Survive, I know that this is not James Val's doing like political spin. I know that he's just using his like NASA vocabulary.
Yes, exactly.
So it's 737 maxed itself, basically, to just be like, we're just throwing it all for that is a wild error. I feel like I haven't seen the car just tuned the brake balance wrong by itself.
Apparently it was a steering wheel issue. They replaced the wheel and that issue went away.
Okay.
So it was like a mechanical glitch.
This is why they didn't
something.
want to put the info-rich display. They didn't want a smart wheel.
That's right. That's
What
right.
happens when you get it's because you be on that phone, but for F1 steering wheels. This never would have happened if it was just a little display built into the cockpit rather than being on the wheel.
Yeah. He tried to change the brake bias and the GeForce experience wanted to update itself and took over the screen. He was like, what?
Yeah, if this is your first season, Williams used to be the lone team on the field where the LCD display was bolted to the car, like where your dashboard would be, and not the wheel. And now they have integrated it into the wheel itself.
Yeah. They've also stopped the they used to have a hole at the bottom of the car and the driver would just like run along the track, and
like Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, exactly.
Lap 11, Leclerc still dealing with his issues, battles with his teammate Carlos Sainz as they come into turn 1. This is pretty good.
Let's get into it.
Sainz getting the upper hand and taking 4th place. Lots of sparks.
Sainz needs work.
Another benefit.
He's dry. He needs a job.
He's putting.
Yes.
Hey, look, who knows? There might be a pretty good seat opening up in the next couple of days. It's hard to tell, but I mean, this is what we're hoping from at least this, right, from Ferrari this year, is that Sainz has none to lose. If anything, he has, a lot to earn and gain by putting himself on the shop window that way. And it was good. It was good battling like that. That was a close overtake. What happened next with regards to Ferrari's strategy was interesting, though, because they decided to pit Charles first. No, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, they did, right?
Yeah.
Undercut, yeah.
Right, so pit stops kick off around here with Russell, though Perez, who is running in 3rd behind Russell, goes a little longer, and when he comes out behind Russell, quickly gets around him on lap 14. And I'll say, at least in this first race, Perez this year does look like he's driving a Red Bull. So kudos to him. Something similar happens, as you said, Danny, with Ferrari, where Leclerc is told to pit early, perhaps because of the brake issue. I don't know.
Can't imagine those tires.
And then
were in
Sainz,
amazing shape.
Yeah, I gotta imagine with all those lockups, they're looking pretty octagonal. Sainz then stops 3 laps later, comes out behind Leclerc, and then passes him with a dive down the inside of turn 1 for 4th place on lap 17. Do you want to take a second on this Ferrari strategy here?
Who,
Danny?
me? What was your guys'? Because at the time I was just surprised that they were going with it seemed like the undercut was the most advantageous strategy. So it just seemed interesting again that like in this position you have Sainz, who is the driver in the lead. Presumably they knew that Charles' car was kind of going to be compromised in this race, but they still ended up in a position where they were throwing it ahead of Sainz. I just found it to be particular. It's just a bit odd, a bit of like a classic Ferrari call when it came to tire strategy. We're just saying something because that guy's at a different team making bad calls over there during this race.
Well, let's see, where was I? Sainz is not done. 1 lap later, he tucks up behind Russell down into turn 4 and sweeps around the outside of him, making it look easy and getting some oil on the camera lens or something.
Yeah, that was a bit bizarre, actually, wasn't it? With the oil thing.
Well, that was.
Maybe that's just.
This is where things just don't feel like they're good with the Mercedes. Because there's like a weird mist coming off Russell's car, and when it's just a few laps later that Russell's told to stop using overtake, which I assume he's stopped using the sort of max discharge power mode.
Right.
For the battery engine. And then what is it, like lap 23, both Mercedes drivers are given orders to start lifting and coasting. Again, can't be stressed enough. Yes, it's the desert, it's night, and it was not a particularly hot night. Like it was pretty mild.
Yeah.
And the Mercedes were having to adopt really aggressive lift and coast, reduce heat strategies less than halfway through the race.
Which they have changed their aero, right? They have changed their aero package significantly in the direction of Red Bull, and a lot of what the problem seemingly Mercedes had last year was getting enough air through with that sort of oddly shaped the side pod, the zero side pod sort of thing. So yeah, there was also earlier in the race also, I think it was early in the race that Hamilton also complained that he had basically completely emptied the battery like halfway through a lap. What did it call it again? Derating or something? Isn't that what it's called?
Derate, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the rate at which the battery is able to like charge itself back up again or whatever. Is that what it is?
Or because it's empty, the engine is devoting more power to charging it.
Right. Yeah.
Also reminds me, sometimes you're not prepared for a question and you just fumble it, but Brundle was asked, so like, what's this like discharge stuff? Like,
you're right.
What does this mean? How does it work? And what unfolded was like the nightmare of like you're asked to give a speech to the high school, and it was like eventually they sort of throw up their hands and they're like, "Hey, Karun, you're here. Why don't you tell us how these engines work? We've only had them for a decade."
2 laps later, Hamilton says, "My seat's broken."
Oh God, yeah,
so
he did.
It's really just all popping off.
That same lap, we also start getting Albon. We get his in car as he's being told to change things. I think this is around the time he's being told to change things on the car settings, and he's like, "I can't see anything on the steering wheel." And what he means
wasn't bright enough.
He keeps having his interface hijacked by the car too hot pop up.
Oh my
and you know
God.
how it is. You click on the car too hot pop up, and you're taken to a singles website for your area.
You have to wait 3 seconds and then you can, if you click on it before that, it's gonna make it.
You have to tell it which cookies you'll accept, and then you can but yeah, so like he starts getting those warnings right and left about his car, and apparently like he can't make the adjustments because like the interface is not letting him like see what he is doing with the car. So some real teething pains with their move to F1 steering wheel technology from 10 years ago.
So good. I literally went to college for like building multimedia interfaces like that. Well, I mean, not for F1 cars, but like bespoke weird things like that. And that is hilarious to me that the thing pops up so much. I mean, you can like in an airplane, right? I mean, bringing up airplanes only because Drew's like, do you have your pilot's license? Do you have a single pilot? Do you have a pilot's license? Yeah. It's like that. It's like you can mute errors, right? Like in a plane, if it like comes up, you can like say, "Okay, got it."
Drew's up there.
Yeah, maybe.
All steam gauges for me. Thanks.
Okay, fair enough. It seems completely outrageous that like as hard as these people's jobs are and trying to like make sure that they drive these cars fast and don't accidentally kill themselves, they also have to worry about the same HCI problems that my daughter has when she's trying to get her favorite cartoon on her tablet to start. It's so silly.
Well, things go from bad to worse with Bottas. After that front wing damage, he comes into the pits and has a 52-second pit stop, which if this is your first season, that's too long.
I feel like this exact problem happens to... Has this like the third time this has happened to him?
It was almost as long as his 2-day pit stop in Monaco 2021.
Oh my God, I forgot. That's what it was. Yes, the wheel nut that got stuck.
Out with the mallets. Yeah.
So it's similar this time. This time it was a cross-threaded wheel nut, which is slightly different from last time, which happened. He pitted in Monaco, and the wheel gun didn't make full contact with the nut, and thus the torque of the gun sheared off the outside edges of the nut, and therefore there was no longer anything for the gun to grip.
And the wheel was just stuck.
They just had to... pull them into the garage. We'll get this figured out back at the factory. They had to ship the car back to the factory.
It's insane. Yeah. I feel bad for it was this time so that's what it was. That makes sense. It looked like they were saying during the broadcast that somebody had the wrong tire, but you don't bring out
No.
one wrong tire. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you got to be bad
They're
at
all
your
on a
job
batch.
if you're doing that. Yeah.
Lap 46, Leclerc seems to have gotten his brake issues under control and is chasing Russell into the back half of the track. And right as Leclerc gets close, Russell himself locks up and goes wide.
Yeah, that was cool.
Allowing
That was a
Leclerc,
cool shot.
Yeah, to come through for fourth place.
We did see a lot. Turn 10 was a lot of action. If I'll be honest, I'd love to see the stats on this. It felt like we did not get as much overtaking at Bahrain as we usually do.
I don't think we did.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a worry. But this whole time, by the way, Verstappen is like 20 seconds ahead of everyone, right? Or maybe a little bit less.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah. Lap 52. Last thing I've got here on my notes is that we hear Tsunoda get told driver swap, and at this point he was chasing Magnussen for 12th place, a position he had been in since lap 36, and had made it up to half a second behind Magnussen. He then responds, "Are you kidding me now?" Well, Ricciardo was right behind him. Tsunoda does let him through a lap later, saying sarcastically over the radio, "Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it." And that's not the end of it, because after the race ends, Tsunoda dive bombs Ricciardo, getting pretty close to him.
Wait, were they literally? This wasn't because were they still racing when this happens, or are they also gone across timing and scoring and they were no longer actively racing?
I don't think they're racing at this point.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Ricciardo said afterward, "I'll let him cool down. We know what he's like. Obviously, during the moment, he's very ... That's Yuki. It's a long season, so we need to be able to work together. So I'm not going to come in there with an angry attitude. It's just we have to be very honest and realistic that the car swap should have happened when they called it. But let's be real. This is something we talked about before the race. It was very likely I was going to use the soft at the end of the race. So he knew that, and there was a chance that I would have a pace advantage at the end."
Okay, that fills in one of my big questions. Was had they not discussed this possibility with the drivers? Because that was the part of this that, like, if it was a thing they just sort of felt their way towards and they hadn't laid ground rules for what happens when somebody's in more of a attack mode strategy on a softer compound, because this is if that is a strategy, you have to be able to swap the cars around without it being weird with the drivers. It's the lifespan of softs is so short in general on these tracks that you do not have time, even wasting a couple laps to discuss it. It just has to happen. You need to be able to get it done right away. And instead what happens here is Yuki kind of ignores it for a lap or two and then sort of grudgingly moves past. And then the move doesn't come off. Neither of these guys really seemed like they were able to. I think Yuki came closer, honestly, to putting a dent into Magnussen. The swap let him get away a little bit. But if they had discussed it in advance and Yuki had known that there would be a sort of counter strategy that Ricciardo would be using, boy, you don't fight us on this. Come on.
Yeah. Especially if you're clearly these guys are trying to put on the best show they can for their own individual abilities, to be chosen for whether that's the Red Bull seat or something else better, right? And I don't know how you can. He must be feeling, if I could just play armchair psychologist, already a lot of pressure from Ricciardo to try to overtake Magnussen instead of following a team order. You know what I mean?
We should also mention that this is for 12th position.
Yeah.
there is nothing on the line here except maybe busting up a gearbox.
Except Helmut Marko going average finishing position, lower than Ricciardo.
Yeah, I guess. It just seems early in the year to be doing that. It's funny because if you had asked us maybe a year ago especially, what would be the good times duo? You'd probably throw in with a Yuki Daniel. That seems like a fairly meme-worthy collaboration, but no love lost, as it turns out.
Guess not. Speaking of which, Max Verstappen wins the Bahrain Grand Prix by, let's see,
Yay.
22.457 seconds.
Oh no.
The largest margin of victory in
no.
20 years of
Oh,
Bahrain.
Oh no.
He also scored an additional point for setting the fastest lap of the race.
No.
Second place, Sergio Perez, the other Red Bull, followed by Carlos Sainz, who won Driver of the Day, as voted by the F1 audience. And his teammate Charles Leclerc in fourth.
God.
Then we've got George Russell in fifth, followed by Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton. By the way, Lewis improved 2 places from his qualifying position, while Russell lost 2. So there's your answer about the car direction.
Maybe were those cars that they were faster than anyway? The 2 he overtook. But yeah,
good point. 8th place, Oscar Piastri. 9th place, Fernando Alonso. And in 10th place, Lance Stroll, who, remember, spun on turn 1.
There you go.
Made it back up.
He was just happy to be able to use both of his arms and his feet this year at Bahrain.
That's true.
Considering last year he was recovering from that crash.
Right. In 11th, Zhou Guanyu, followed by Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon in 15th, then Nico Hulkenberg in 16th, Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly, then Valtteri Bottas, and finally Logan Sargent in the Williams. This is the first time in Formula One history that all cars have finished 2 consecutive races.
That really?
Yes.
That seems...
And it's only the 17th time that every car finished.
Really? That seems completely insane to me.
According to racefans.net.
Wow. In the long seasons we have now, we can't get 2 in a row all that often. That's nuts. I mean, we are at the end years of an era, so reliability is always going to be pretty good. Although a lot of these cars seem to have trouble in the heat in a particularly chilly weekend in Bahrain at nighttime, so maybe there's some worry there. I mean, there's worry if you're in Alpine, regardless of if you finish the bloody race or not. Like,
yeah,
the
only
were
cars
plumb
you finished
last
ahead of are cars that were stationary
exactly
for 30 seconds apiece on the track.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I would like to. I think the most surprising thing to me in this lineup is Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg. So Hulkenberg had to pit on lap 1. Kevin Magnussen started 15th, ended 12th. There's a quote from their team principal, Komatsu. If anything, for me, this circuit exposes that weakness, meaning tire degradation that they've been plagued with in years prior. So I was pretty happy. I think this is a really strong showing, frankly, from Haas, and curious to see how things progress.
Yeah, if you compare them with some of the folks they should be fighting with, like they'll be laughing with the situation at Alpine for sure. What do we think of everyone else? I guess Aston Martin did okay, but they're not exactly in the mix with the big folks. They'll be wanting to increase their development and catch up with.
Were they
like
also
McLaren did well
issues?
Again? Did they as well?
They were commenting on that. Like, I mean, we know that the Williams and Mercedes both from the same engine had heat issues. I feel like they also they noted that something else was going on, maybe with one of the other teams. I think that might have been Aston, but yeah, not amazing. But it did sort of seem like it was a through line where Mercedes powered cars were having a few more issues than other folks.
George Russell, Norris, Hamilton, Piastri, Alonso, Stroll. Those are all Mercedes engines, and they're all 5 to 10 positions. So yeah, interesting. More data needed.
Exactly.
Good thing we have a race this weekend.
Good thing. I need a race to wash that race out of my mouth. It was not. I was excited to watch it because it was like, cool. Yeah. It's Saturday morning. This is weird, but hey, look, F1's back. Excited to do it. And it was about 45 laps in, and I was like, oh, this has been. I'm excited because it's back. But this has been bad. Objectively, this is bad. This is not good. This is bad. Look how far Max is ahead. Oh no. So yeah, let's hope Jeddah can be better. But my biggest problem is Bahrain's usually good, so I'm a little bit worried about just how little overtaking there was.
Well, Verstappen is convinced, so says racefans.net, that his rivals are closer than they looked in Bahrain, which he attributes to it being a little windy, and we'll get to maybe Jeddah will be windy as well. But Mercedes was also saying things like, "We think we'll show better in the next race," which is surprising because it's only a week away. So that's Bahrain, and that's it for the race recap. We are going to take a break, and we will be back with the news. Buckle up, sports fans. News
boy.
time. I think so. The way that we lay out our notes document, the shared notes doc that we are all looking at, we do like sometimes, usually it's like one bullet point per news story. Sometimes if there's like multiple associated stories, we'll put like 2 links under one header.
Right.
This one has 6.
Yeah.
I think that's a record.
This just, I wouldn't say it's the gift that kept on giving. It's the story that keeps getting weirder and weirder. And it feels like it is coming from a completely different universe to the one that you see on track. And it also seems like it couldn't possibly be coming at a worse time for practically everyone involved as well. It seems it's almost like, and this is, and I'm if I'm making little jokes about this, I'm certainly not making light of the allegations or what's happened or the investigation or anything. But there's an element of this that almost feels like the sort of the global frustration that everyone has had with the dominance of Max Verstappen and Red Bull has sort of created this like evil tumor within the world of Red Bull, which is now trying to destroy it. Because I can't square the circle on this. Clearly, this is a story that has been going on for a long time behind closed doors that we are largely not privy to. But in the past week, it's basically sort of spilled out. The dirty laundry has, and now we're getting it all, probably like a fire hose, like we weren't supposed to, right? Like it's all coming so fast, and it has the sort of Game of Thrones like moment to moment who's going to come out on top vibe as we all sort of refresh our feeds and see what the latest thing is.
You want to just kind of reset before we kind of dive into this, what we're talking about here?
Sure. And I've apologies in advance. Froggy is really interested in this, and I've been doing my best all podcasts to mute my mic so that you don't have to listen to his crap all podcast. But I'm just gonna have to let him chime in every once in a while. So we have been talking about this story for a number of weeks. This is the news that broke a number of weeks ago that before the season started, that Christian Horner was under investigation for alleged messages or No, I guess it wasn't messages then. It was alleged abuse of power. Yeah, coercive behavior is the way it was put. You're right. With an employee at Red Bull on the racing team, presumably.
Under investigation by Red Bull itself.
By Red Bull,
the parent company.
And a third party was brought in to basically do this investigation and to interview Christian. And we were sort of expecting a quicker turnaround on the results of this. It took a little bit longer than maybe folks were expecting. There was some squeamishness from some of their sponsors, and from Ford, their engine supplier in the not too distant future. Also saying that they hope this will be transparent and that there will be the investigation will be transparent and that they will be resolved quickly. Because the whole thing just kind of it looked bad. It looked bad and it stank, and we didn't know how bad the allegations were or what nature they were in or anything like that. And in a vacuum like that, anything is kind of possible. The next, I guess, thing that happened was that it came out that he had been cleared of any wrongdoing, that there was going to be no more investigations from the Red Bull side. There was we were wondering here, Rob was making the great point of, will there be some sort of external civil case around this thing? Will there be a court case? Who knows? That doesn't seem to have happened. But then
they're apparently the complainant has a right of appeal.
Right. And we don't know which way that's going, because this has been fairly, behind closed doors. So then I think the first domino that fell with the past, 4 or 5 days news is that a bunch of F1 people, basically all of the team principals, the FIA, Stefano Domenicali, a bunch of journalists within the the F1 space were all sent an email containing a link to a Google Drive folder that had allegedly a bunch of screenshots and materials pertaining to the investigation of Christian Horner with regard to this matter. Those messages are some of the more salacious ones that are, and like, you know, no one is able to confirm whether these are legit or not. So, you know, you
also worth knowing that like a lot of outlets have not posted this stuff.
Yes.
And like even the official F1 subreddit will delete anything and ban people for posting it.
Well, let's not forget the great legacy in UK libel law that F1 has given us with the Max Mosley verdict when the Sun basically like caught him in a kink dungeon and published
Bunga part. Was it him who did that? Yeah, I think so. Was he dressed up as a SS officer or
he
something?
Wasn't. Like, I believe
he wasn't.
So I was
more
curious enough about this.
Was he allegedly
being Oswald Mosley's son? And then I was like, did he really be like, I want to have a Nazi fantasy kink party? And the answer was no. Instead,
Prince
he just
Harry
had a
know.
prisoner kink party where he would just get lightly beat on. But the point, and that I think is where things go wrong. He sues the shit out of, I think it was the Sun, and wins. It's kind of their Hulk Hogan verdict, but it changes libel protections. It reduces libel protections for the UK press and makes the UK a haven for libel tourism, where people can bring lawsuits against publications for libel using the UK standards of the law as established by the Mosley verdict that make it way, way, way easier to basically shut a publication down for this. So I think, like, oddly enough, we come full circle here where this stuff comes out, and I was surprised the degree to which nobody will even describe what is in the text dump of what's going on.
Yes. And Red Bull has not confirmed whether or not the documents are real or have been falsified. So take what you will from that.
Yeah, I have seen some of them. I don't know if I should say.
I think it bears because, like, yes, all of this is alleged. This could be a spoofed dossier. It's certainly happened before, but at the same time, we've also seen lots of embarrassing text messages crop up between powerful people and people they are trying to impress or people they're having affairs with, etc. What are we dealing with, or what is this dossier allege we were dealing with here in the investigation?
The way I would describe this, and I also would say that of the ones that I read, and I sort of read them squinting a little bit, I would say it also needs to be understood that, like, this is not the totality of the alleged behavior either. Like, the ones that maybe are being shared around online in certain places are probably the ones that are going to be shared because they're the most salacious, not necessarily because they're the most incriminating. So, but the stuff that I saw was like very much messages, text messages, WhatsApp messages, kind of stuff. I think there were iPhone texts, I forget. Basically of a flirtatious manner, with, you know, maybe one of the parties being a bit more interested than the other. You know what I mean? Like a bit sort of, I don't know how to put it. Again, who knows? One day maybe it was one way, maybe it was another. But it definitely, it was the type of stuff that if I was, you know, partnered with either party, I wouldn't be particularly happy about reading, I would say. That type of stuff.
Also, and the stuff that sounds like I would sort of clearly run afoul of a lot of like HR protections and such, is you have someone basically doing the, hey, what you doing? What you wearing? Hey, want to send me a picture? Like sex pest stuff.
Yeah. And also a lot of like just straight up like way more, you know, I was thinking about you and went off and, you know, sorted myself out type of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not that, it's and again, alleged, who knows, yada yada. Obviously, immediately afterwards, he's getting interviewed by everyone about this.
There is a picture of him, like, which you've seen a couple times in Drive to Survive, surrounded by journalists.
Right.
And they've all put all their phones and like recorders on the table.
he's got his answer, which is that, I'm not going to comment on, I forget how he framed it, but it was basically like, unconfirmed, blah, 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 things. It should also be mentioned that, and I do feel quite sorry for her. Jerry Halliwell is around this entire, Jerry Halliwell, Horner is around, his wife is around this entire time, probably as a, relatively strategized public show of solidarity, but I can't imagine it was a particularly fun one. Basically, what this does is bring a story that a lot of people thought had been maybe not put to bed, but was sort of like going to sit in the background while we get to the business of racing for the first time this year. It basically forces it straight in front of everyone immediately. And that this has a sort of a shockwave effect across the entire paddock. You had other bosses, notably Toto Wolff and Zach Brown, being asked what they thought of this whole thing. They were very sort of gingerly trying to step around it and not make it a Red Bull versus Mercedes manner or anything like that, trying to sort of make sure that the F1 sort of makes sure that this does not start to like damage the reputation of the entire sport, which it certainly is getting into at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, reading some of Toto's and Zach's quotes, it does seem a little gleeful, a little like we need people to be held to account for things.
This might also be like, maybe, I don't know. I think a lot, like this is all alleged. Maybe this guy's always been a prick, and maybe this is a like chickens coming home to roost, and they're not saying it. They're not twisting the knife, but they're also like, yeah, like we should have greater accountability. I don't know.
So I think that the one sort of kernel to their comments that I latched onto was that and this is from an article in The Athletic. Their point is that the FIA has ethics standards,
yeah,
and they should be following up themselves into this, because this was an independent Red Bull investigation, right? If there is smoke to this fire, or I guess fire to the smoke,
right?
The FIA should look into it. And this is from The Athletic. The Athletic understands, according to a person briefed on the matter, that the FIA has not requested a copy of the report from Red Bull. The FIA has the power to investigate issues if there is sufficient evidence for it to believe there may have been a breach of its international sporting code or code of ethics, which would be overseen by its ethics committee. So that's really the point here that these team principals are trying to make.
Didn't stop, thankfully his terrible driving kick got him out of the sport, but Nikita Mazepin famously didn't run afoul of that, and he was, the evidence of his was in plain sight. So I guess what's the next domino to fall? Is it because I don't want to
Yost, right?
It must be. No, I guess there's one more. The issue that has subsequently come to light, I think, but I guess is chronologically earlier than this, is the whole there's a report out saying that apparently they had prepared press releases to get rid of Horner, that they were ready to axe him, and that
which sounds like, there's a presidential speech for if the Apollo 11 astronauts died, right? Just in case.
Perhaps. But apparently, according to Jalopnik, that he threatened legal action to keep his job. This feels a bit more.
That's really the key point, which
right.
is like, according to, and this is from Jalopnik, is saying that the German language outlet Motorsport Total says that the company was willing to see Horner walk away without bringing the allegations to light. So it basically told him, according to this, listen, this concern has come up. You can walk, and we won't say anything, and you get to, have your, your reputation intact. He then fought that, and that's where we are
right
now.
Like nothing would have been said, nothing would have been public. Walk away. because obviously the thing that I haven't brought up in specifically, but who leaked these documents is clearly part of the politic of what's
It
going
was
on
me.
here. So it wasn't, of
Sorry.
course. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're just
sorry.
playing dumb, saying you hadn't read them. Yeah. So where did this come from? And a lot of people are pointing at Max Verstappen's father is perhaps one of them. Who knows? Clearly, there's some sort of civil war going
I don't
on.
know why he would do that.
Yeah, so we don't know if Joss was the one who leaked them. We don't know who leaked it, but he then starts getting involved in the story in a much more direct route.
Yeah, so obviously he's got a vested interest here. He wants his son to be with a competent team, and obviously it's doing well now. But this kind of thing has, could potentially negatively impact the team in a major way. So that has led to him calling for Horner to go. And a lot of rumors swirling around that, well, there's a vacant seat at Mercedes. Maybe Max Verstappen would go there, which is just crazy to contemplate.
It seems insane to think about at this stage.
Yeah. This Motorsport article points out that that could theoretically happen if there are exit clauses in Verstappen's contract. If a new team boss comes in, and the other one is this from Race Fans, reports claim that Verstappen has an option to leave Red Bull Motorsport. I'm sorry, if the consultant Helmut Marko does not remain at the team.
Right.
Marko apparently told F1 Insider, "I won't stand in Max's way." So that's where that is. And then the BBC is reporting that the Telegraph, the
Dutch Telegraph,
the Dutch version, reported that Max Verstappen had been asked by Mohammed bin Sulayem, the president of the FIA, to back Horner publicly, which is something that BBC Sport independently verified, which is itself kind of nuts.
And it's dumbass in the sport. Like,
right?
Yeah,
honestly, like that dude is cannot take a step without tripping over shoelaces. It's an incredible. We'll get to the other part of this in a minute. Yeah. I think when I look at this, okay, so we're using the term like allegations a lot, and it is true. Like, we do not have the sort of clarity that would probably come from a civil trial. We have documents that were leaked clearly as part of an effort to embarrass and probably maneuver Christian Horner out of a powerful position. There are a lot of incentives here to selectively redact or misrepresent 100%. Things. Like, this is not like my inclination is to suspect these documents are probably roughly on the level, because we've just seen this story play out so many times. But the context in which it is playing out, it is so nakedly part of high politics at Red Bull, and there are so many incentives to go outside the lines here that, like, I would want to know more, and I want it to not come through the lens of internal processes at Red Bull before I sort of had any definitive suspicion definitive sense of like how this is unfolded. I will say, if these things are on the level, he'd have to go. And if Red Bull wanted him to go anyway, I don't know why they just didn't pull the trigger. I don't know how you get to a finding from your, external counsel who's brought in to lead this investigation. I don't know how you get to a he did nothing wrong if what was leaked is representative of what was in the entire review that they did.
Yeah, there's a very good shout that if that investigation, and yes, of course, who knows, the company hiring the company could lean on them. I suspect the companies that get hired to do that are set up in a way to make sure that doesn't happen. They, to a certain extent, it's always hard to tell, but like perhaps there was people within Red Bull who hoped they would get the other decision, because it would make all of this a lot easier. There's clearly some sides going on here. I was reading a bunch about just the makeup of the ownership at Red Bull at the moment. Mark Mateschitz, Dietrich's son, owns 49%, and the rest is owned by is it Charlam Utiva, who I believe is
The Thai side of the
I want
company.
to say Thai. Yeah, is the ownership. And apparently the Mateschitz crowd are in with the Verstappen crowd. And the Verstappen crowd,
which is the Helmut
perhaps
Marko crowd.
Which is the Helmut Marko, exactly. So, and then there is the question of where does Adrian Newey land in this whole thing as well?
Well, he's
and
the first one we heard about Horner clauses existing in contracts at Red Bull. It was through him that it's very funny that these sort of like agreements that would have secured Horner within the company that rendered him invincible might be one of the things that have caused him to be like assassinated at the team, because now there's so many incentives to like move and get more money elsewhere. But going back to like, if this stuff is on the level, a guy like you couldn't for one it seems like you'd be able to win a civil suit in any jurisdiction you can imagine. But two, like, I just don't think you could leave a guy like this in position, regardless of how accomplished he's been, because it is when you have someone acting that out of pocket and that inappropriately at a company, it's kind of saying multiple things. Like, you can't go back to normal. Like, if you do the wrist slap thing, you basically told them you're golden here. Like, you can do whatever and no one's going to touch you. So, that's good. Like, bad behavior is more likely to occur down the road. Also, you're portraying a horrific lack of judgment and an incredible selfishness that like is incompatible with leading a team like this, where you've got if this is true, like, you'd have a leadership figure putting their basest and most selfish interests ahead of the well-being of the team, ahead of like their own self-interest for where they're at in the company. And that, you sort of project that forward into all the other things that someone at the head of an organization like this would touch. That's just not someone you could leave in place. So the fact that if this is true, if that dossier is complete and roughly on the level, that Red Bull couldn't find cause to maneuver him out, that to me seems pretty astonishing. So I don't know. Like, yeah.
Maybe I'm a cynic. Maybe it's this has happened so fast that I can't believe what's happening in front of my eyes. But in one way, I could I'm with you. I think in any normal company, this would not fly. This whole thing makes me feel lots of ways about Red Bull's F1 operation. Like, we've heard they're cutthroat and they're this and they're that. They might just be a shower of assholes. Like, this sounds absolutely everything about this. The fact, not just the alleged stuff that Horn has done, all of the leaking, all of the the sniping in the papers, all of this stuff is so like this is a real company that employs people, and what's all of this stuff that's going on is just, it seems insane. It seems like the type of thing you'd expect from, like, I don't know, like an Italian football club or something. It's like, it's not something that
it's
you
not
expect
a real company.
from.
It is a medieval company. Like, to be like, Dietrich Mateschitz was the king of that company. And all of this was like, why is Dr. Helmut Marko, why was he in that position? Because he's buddies with Dietrich Mateschitz. Like, and this is what happens when a king dies. Like, in a weird way, when you look at it through this lens, Dietrich Mateschitz dies, and a year later, all his top lieutenants are like frantically knifing each other. The Yoss statement, it's like, these guys have the most commanding position we've seen in F1 since Mercedes came out of the gate with the best engine on the grid, and they're blowing it up. And note that Yoss's statement doesn't appear to have. Did you see anything in the statement about sexual harassment or standards of conduct towards? No, it's just this vague like grievance of like, he's the one tearing the team apart. I almost got the sense it had nothing to do with the allegations, and has everything to do with Horner and Marko turning against each other, and Max being in the middle of this. And God, I'd have to go back in I feel like 2 years ago, there were stories that people at Red Bull, maybe Horner, were starting to feel like they needed to put more of a wall around Max between him and Gus. That like he was not an entirely positive figure in terms of like being a part of the crew. And now
I don't think anyone thinks that Jos Verstappen is an entirely positive figure.
No, but like now he's got like some sort of sinecure position with Red Bull. I think he's part of like a like their driver development program, working with Marco. Right. Like it's a weird vibe. Like this is like this is you know, the evil Anthony Hamilton version of how 100%.
Yeah, and it's funny because Anthony Hamilton, like Lewis, is clearly somebody who wants to be involved in everything, and Max kind of just wants to drive the car. Like he doesn't really want to talk about anything else, you know. So in a way, that's how Anthony Hamilton maybe sort of overstays his welcome or takes up
his
space.
Dad to be his like agent and like,
yes,
you know, you'll be the one who says the thing I can't. And Lewis fired his dad famously at a similar juncture in his career. In his career, Lewis was like, "You can be my dad, or you can be my manager. I'd rather you be my dad." So we're gonna protect that relationship.
So the thing that's crazy about this is you're right. Like there's in any reasonable world, it's hard to imagine Horner staying. What's crazy is there's basically no situation in which Horner and Max stay. Like that right now seems to be the least possible situation. It seems way more likely that a bunch of them are going to leave if he doesn't, or maybe they do anyway. Maybe there's something about 2026 car that we don't know about. Maybe the regulations are going to push it less in an aero direction and back towards powertrain.
And
then Mercedes are going to be laughing
regardless. So if you're like,
right,
who do you think if you genuinely don't have confidence in the Red Bull powertrain project,
right?
I would see there being a lot of incentive to be like, I don't care if it's blow this team up to get Max out of here, but we will do it. But it just seems so, again, this is the most like, it's like the gang pulled off the biggest heist in the world. You know what I mean? They're sitting on the loot.
Yeah.
And now they're in the hideout and they're starting to shoot each other. It's turned into Reservoir Dogs at Red Bull. And I think what is kind of lost in this, with good reason, is like the complaint, the allegations, like this has all been so clearly instrumentalized and politicized to further ends that have nothing to do with like what should be the core question. What the hell what the hell happened here? What did Christian Horner, what was his relationship with a female employee? What was said? How did this unfold? That should be that should be what this hinges on.
Yeah. How did he abuse his power? If he did, what are the repercussions of that? I mean, but obviously that was supposed to be all tied up in a bow with the release of that.
Well, it kind of sounds like Red Bull wanted to like blackmail him into just like make it easy for us and like just leave.
Well, that's what 100% what I think is happening. Yeah. Yes, that and then they didn't get the answer they wanted from that crowd. They should have hired a different one with a meaner logo. You know, that told them what they wanted. Maybe that is, maybe it isn't. Who knows? But
there's a part of me just like thinks when somebody's like, "I'm going to lawyer up," and it is what other bodies are buried there. Like this has always been the thing about like in the NFL when John Gruden was fired, it was because like emails surfaced where he's being just horrifically racist. But he is currently suing the NFL, basically trying to get a lot of other email tranches like released. I think this is still working its way through the courts, saying that like I was unfairly targeted to lose my job because tons of people in the NFL talk this way behind closed doors. And you know the NFL, that's entirely believable.
Yes, 100%. And now that I've have even less of an opinion of the inner workings of Red Bull, I'm sure that there's more stuff here. But Horner did meet with Max's manager as well a few days ago, and there was a piece out saying that
great. I'm sure that guy's in charge.
Well, yeah, exactly. It seems like this is a real. Once we post this podcast, there's going to be more. I'm waking up every morning, and the first thing I put into my phone is Christian
Dude,
Horner,
we're gonna
you know what
post
I
this
mean?
episode, and like tomorrow, like pictures of his penis are just gonna be out there. Like that's
Okay.
just what's gonna that's what's gonna come out. Is like,
Look, man, with the
Tranche
power of-
2
with
was
the-
released.
with the power of generative AI, if you want, you can just create a picture of Max Verstappen driving Christian Horner's penis. Literally, there are no more creative boundaries left in the world.
Well, I think that's maybe a good point to move on to the next story,
I guess,
which is related in that it involves Mohammed bin Sulayem and ethics.
He thought, you know what? I'll just get this one out while everyone's caring about the Horner thing. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah.
So is this him trying to be
the
like
Friday
Max,
afternoon.
Exactly.
Max, you gotta let the world know Christian's a good guy and you believe in him.
He's a good guy. We love
Drew,
Christian.
What
He's
I
a great
see,
guy.
he was trying to race fix. What's going on? What is this allegation?
Yep. So
For Alonso, though, so that's fine. El Plan, you know what I mean? We're good.
everyone loves Alonso. Yeah, right. El Plan. In the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Alonso was given a 5-second penalty. He pulled in to serve it in the pit lane, but the rear jack touched his car while he was serving the penalty, which is not allowed to happen.
Can't do it.
So he was handed another penalty of 10 seconds. A whistleblower, this is from the BBC, has told the FIA that Ben Sulayem allegedly intervened to overturn a penalty given to Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso at the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. The allegation made by the whistleblower is that Ben Sulayem called Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the FIA's vice president for sport in the Middle East and North Africa region, who was in Saudi Arabia for the race in an official capacity, and made it clear that he thought Alonso's penalty should be revoked.
He's just sitting at home with a bottle of popcorn and his fucking huge golden couch and going like, nah, that's bullshit. Come on. Calls up his boy. What? Does he have any...
I love Alonso. Why overturn this?
Yeah.
Make this go away.
I don't
It's
think
bad
that's
for the
how-
show.
Exactly.
And does he even have like a stake in does the FIA get
I don't think so. I don't, and I think it's very they have the stewards there to sort of create a bubble around those elements of rules and procedures. Like the fact that like no one at the track who's high up in F1 is allowed to talk to them about those matters, let alone Mohammed at home watching the race on television or whatever, or in the paddock. It just seems, I don't know, man. Every news story about this dude, he just seems like he's a bit of a dope.
Drew, like what?
What's
the whistle? Where does
Make
this
him so
lead?
reductive.
With the whistleblower being like he was trying to inappropriately intervene. Like who's going to investigate this?
So they have an ethics committee, the FIA does, and they are looking at
Is
it
he
now.
on it?
Yes, the claim, this is from the BBC article, the claim is in a report by an FIA compliance officer to its ethics committee, which has been seen by BBC Sport. The ethics committee is expected to take 4 to 6 weeks to issue its report. But in regards to what you guys were saying, that this guy might be a dope, I'll just read the final paragraph in this article in full.
Okay.
A number of senior figures have resigned from the FIA in recent months. These include Steve Nielsen, who took on the role of the sporting director in early 2023 and resigned before he had spent a year in his role. The head of the Women's Commission, Deborah Mayer, Gerd Enzer, the head of German Motorsports Authority, the ADAC, who quit his role as an FIA steward, lawyers Pierre Ketterer and Ed Floyd, and FIA single-seater director Tim Goss. None of these figures have given public explanations for their departure from the FIA. I'm sure everything's fine.
Bad lunch. Canteen is rubbish.
In general, when people start leaving on when career bureaucrat type people just start like vanishing en masse,
Good
like
point.
shortly into someone's
Good point.
administration. Good sign of what's going on there.
Career bureaucrats are the canaries in the coal mine for this particular.
This guy
type of
seems
thing.
incompetent. Like,
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
an FIA president. Here's the weird thing. Like, Max Mosley is pretty good at this job. Like his initiatives for like motorsport safety and everything tend to be pretty successful. Like he was controversial and a real asshole, but like in general, he had a few policy priorities he pursued pretty aggressively and made progress on them. And then John Todd's kind of the other model, right? I think he was the last person to hold this job prior to this. And it was kind of like,
You never heard about him.
no, that's the other model. And that is the other model
Yep.
you want to have, where it's like, I'm just behind the scenes, like just administering an organization that fundamentally is there to make sure all these operations just go smoothly and you don't hear about
I saw
this.
the most of the time I heard about Jean Todt was when he was accompanying his wife to awards shows, and I was like,
right.
"Oh yeah, Michelle Yeoh's married to Jean Todt. Fucking A,
That's right.
well done, my tiny king, you legend."
I do want to read one more piece of this article, and sorry, BBC, for just completely just reading your entire reporting here, but it's when an old kind of dusty outlet sneaks in a sentence, I'll read it here.
Okay.
A series of controversies through 2022, Ben Sulayem's first year in office, led to widespread concern about F1 about his presidency and calls from senior figures for him to be replaced. After pressure over the winter of 2022-23, Ben Sulayem said he would take a step back from direct involvement in F1, saying it had been his, quote, stated objective to be a non-executive president. The controversies included, but were not limited to, blocking for 6 months an agreement between the teams and commercial rights holder to double the number of sprint weekends for 2023, receiving a cease and desist letter from F1's lawyers following his reaction on social media to a story claiming Saudi Arabia's public investment fund had tried to buy the sport for $20 billion, and the emergence of a historical website that quoted him making misogynistic remarks. So yeah, he has just been stepping on rakes.
What wasn't there a misogynistic remark that like no woman could be smarter than any man or something?
So
it was calling a misogynistic remark sort of underplays.
I have not only his remark, but his defense of the remarks.
Right. All right. Here we go.
He defended historical sexist remarks on his website in an interview with the Press Association last November, saying, quote, "What did I say if I said it? Let's assume it was me. I'll tell you exactly what it said."
What?
Which is
fucking
okay.
Confused already. All right, go on.
It says, "I hate when women think they're smarter than us." And then he has ended himself quoting himself.
Okay.
But they hate when men think they are smarter than them. Did I say we are smarter? No. Did I say did I say they are less smarter? No. For God's sake, if that's the only thing they have against me, please be my guest. You can do worse than that. Well, it's no longer the only thing we have against you.
Do people hate when people... There are a multitude of billions of people who are smarter than me. I don't hate them. I'm like, cool. All right. That's good. I like playing video games.
Look, my man's just calling out that there's a double standard and misandry's okay.
Exactly.
No, it is absurd. And
Ugh.
I feel like part of his denial too there was like they were forum posts. So just like real edgelord keyboard warrior shit from back in the day. But yeah, this guy just like this is a position where you're dealing with like a lot of live current is the analogy I would make. Is like there's a lot of like wires that you're surrounded by that carry a lot of current, and you got to be careful about touching them, and ideally you don't want to touch them very much at all. And he seems to want to like put his stamp on every freaking thing that the FIA president touches, and every time he just does it in the most ham-fisted way because he doesn't seem very good at politicking with the teams, or even apparently having the faintest clue what lane he should be in. Like just trying to parachute in to be like, I don't think that should be a 10-second penalty. Like, yeah, maybe I agree. Yeah, that's a little harsh. It's not your call. Literally, it's not your call to make.
Your call is to tell the people to make the calls. Who they should make the calls,
and then be a shield.
Why are you messing with?
Why did they hand that penalty? Your job at that point is like, them's the rules.
Yeah.
Oh,
you set them. Whatever. All right, let's move on to yet more drama, Rob.
Great. What we got?
Yeah. So this is sort of tangential, but it is an F1 story after a fashion. It's also a journalism story. So about a week ago, people started posting around an article by Kate Wagner, known to a lot of folks as McMansion Hell on Twitter. It was an architecture like critic who would just mercilessly roast McMansion listings on Zillow and talk about like
Yeah.
how architecturally dog shit your typical McMansion is. It was very funny. She also is a writer, and she got into cycling, pro cycling, and started covering that extensively as like a freelance journalist. And that appears to have led her, because Ineos is a huge sponsor in cycling, that led her
Yes, of course.
to write a story for Road and Track that was deleted without explanation after running last week. It is titled Behind F1's Velvet Curtain. The subhead: if you wanted to turn someone into a socialist, you could do it in about an hour by taking them for a spin around the paddock of a Formula One race. The kind of money I saw will haunt me forever. The only way to read it was on the Wayback Machine, because Road and Track deleted it, again with no notice. This thing was apparently published March 1st and just gone immediately. So people were wondering what that was about. And finally today, the Defector got the new Road and Track editor-in-chief to go on the record about why that was. And the explanation wasn't like particularly impressive. Basically, it was that let's see, the story was taken down because I felt it was the wrong story for our publication. No one from the brands or organizations mentioned the story, put any sort of pressure on me or anyone else. In fact, I heard nothing at all from anyone in the story. No contact whatsoever. And basically goes on to explain he's new to the EIC role. It sounds like Road and Track was sort of divided between the magazine side and the digital side. This was commissioned by digital. It sounds like they unified editorial houses, and his first act of business was to just, without word, delete this thing. That is very weird. Just as someone who's like, we've all worked in this business, like, it is the nature of the business that editors will be like, I don't really like what ran that piece. I'm not happy with it. I don't think we hit our standard. And you just live with it, right? Like every piece is kind of, it's a new inning in the game. And that's the score. You sort of live with it. And if there's issues with the pieces, you take those lessons moving forward, but you don't just stealth delete, because that leads people to wonder why you did it. It raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And it's a shitty thing to do for the writers and editors who worked on the piece.
Yeah, like especially spiking a story like after it's been published is particularly odd, especially if it's not one that like there's a I mean, even if there's a controversy around a story that's out there, maybe it gets an edit or it gets an update or something like that.
Yeah.
But spiking a story that nobody has that's been published that nobody's really making it makes it sound like somebody got a phone call, you know what I mean? And they just don't want to say they got the phone call. And they feel like let's get rid of this thing. No one will notice now. And then, of course, Streisand effect,
Yeah.
and everyone's talking about it.
Now, what's bizarre is it's not a particularly objectionable story. Like, if you think this is like, that's, if you like, for one, that subhead's probably promises a spicier story than it actually is. Really, it's a like meditation on the alienation that a normie, which most freelance writers are, feels being surrounded by the sort of people who show up in the VIPest of VIP paddocks at an F1 event.
Yeah, it's like wealth's like a hitman level. Like it's not.
Yeah,
This isn't just like this isn't first class in the airplane as you're wandering back to your 20th row seat in coach. This is a level of institutional wealth that is I don't think I've ever personally been surrounded by like that.
No, but I also say, like, I do understand like why an editor might be like, oh, I don't know that I totally love the piece. In part because there's something a bit like provincial about it in some ways. There's long paragraphs of being surrounded by $30,000 handbags and such, and it's like, yeah, that's F1. Like that's just kind of, it comes with the territory, right? Like, open the pages of Vogue and you see a similar, like, these are not, yes, the wealth and privilege and inequality it exposes is like, shocking, but at the same time, it's like I don't know that it's as explosive or insightful a comment to offer
But
about this experience as you
but
think.
but you said the stuff about the drivers was interesting. The stuff about sort of the
This is
what
where
they
I
have
do
to
yes.
do, I guess.
Yeah, so this is like, sorry, the graphics jumped out. It was like I saw $30,000 Birkin bags and $10,000 off-white Nikes. I saw people with the kind of Rolexes that make strangers cry on Antiques Roadshow. And it's like, yeah, it's just like, very standard like gonzo stuff. Where it does get more interesting is, yes, this tier of VIP gets greater than usual access to the teams, and they get greater than usual access to the drivers. Like, she was invited to attend a very expensive dinner where Lewis Hamilton was a guest of honor, and people got to chat and hang out with Lewis Hamilton and speak to him over dinner and ask him questions about like how he feels about the future of the team and such. And there's a vibe that it's kind of surprising the degree to which the drivers, who on the one hand are some of those like privileged and important and protected people, like everything centers around them in the world of a racing team, they end up kind of being like creatures in a terrarium for this tier of VIP guest. And that part was more interesting.
Well, Rob, as we transition here to Saudi Arabia, perhaps Alpine can have a better race.
Yeah, do you want a normal F1 story?
Yeah.
Well, normal-ish by the standards of this season. We found out that 2 senior Alpine technical staff resigned before the first race, and they were still like, I guess, technically in their roles for the first race, but Matt Harmon, who oversaw like chassis development, and longtime Arrowhead Dirk de Beer have left the company, and Alpine announced that they are instituting, I've heard it described as a McLaren like tripartite division of technical departments reporting in directly to Bruno Famine. So it would be like aero, performance, and engineering would all have a department head that are reporting up to Famine. Yeah, I guess something has to change. The car sucks, and so they're gonna turn it into more of a dedicated departments, each with a direct line to the chief. Maybe on a less packed show, I would like to revisit. To me, it feels like this program has completely lost its way, and I don't know if it started with showing Cyril the door, or if it was having Laura Rossi take over and sort of, jerk the team around Ammar Safnauer. I don't know, but it kind of feels like they're rebooting the Alpine F1 team.
Yeah.
And
it's a rebuilding decade.
Yeah. All that progress. There was a lot of hard-won progress they made in like standing up a like credible like midfield, maybe knocking on the door of like
They got
the
fourth
top teams
a few years ago.
Yeah. And now they're like 19th and 20th in qualifying. Only beat cars that basically like had to park for a minute on the track.
Yeah.
Like, man, I don't know who's left who was still part of those decisions. Maybe it's just Luca De Meo, who's like head of Renault. But it kind of feels like every decision they made for about like the last 4 years has been reactive and ultimately left them in a worse place.
Well, maybe we'll be at a better place, Danny, in scenic Saudi Arabia.
Yes, Jeddah. Who amongst us hasn't dreamt of visiting the crown of Jeddah? Jeddah. I just don't know. I mean, I went to Dubai and I've been to Qatar and places like that before. I don't think I ever really wanted to go here, but we go here a lot now because that's what F1 does. It expands into petro states as much as it possibly can, be them Saudi Arabia or America. So we're back here for, this would be year 4. 2021 was the first year we did it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Is that the 4th year? No, I guess maybe 2022 didn't happen, or I don't know, COVID. If I'm not making any sense, it's because I have long COVID. We are back here. This track has been odd. When it first came on the calendar, people were like, wow, it's a really, really fast street circuit. Do we need this? And then it ended up producing some interesting races, and it's kind of become a bit of a favorite for folks, even though, the reasons why are sometimes connected to the layout of the track. It's 50 laps, 6.17 kilometers. It's about 3.8 miles. Very little runoff here. It's a street circuit. They have actually done a decent amount of changes. Every year they nip and tuck this one. So that's one thing to be. They changed the DRS zone at one stage. They opened up some turns at I think in 2023 to make it a bit more safer. This year they've widened just some of the turns and some of the curbs. And what's going to be interesting is because the cars this year are able to run on the curbs a little bit harder because they're a little bit more stable, and whether or not we have folks rushing up on these curbs a little bit more, which has kind of always been the element of a Monaco or a Singapore, is how close to the wall you're willing to go. So this year, where at the end, at the start of the race, turns 1 and 2, you basically take them on the curbs already. So the fact that some of the curbs later on the track are a little bit higher, so maybe there'll be a bit more action there. Now the cars are feeling a little bit more stable. In terms of the track itself, I guess another change that happened, I think new for this year, is, do you remember the Alonso Hamilton thing where Alonso was like, they were both pretending to not want to get to the DRS detection point?
Yes.
Remember that whole thing? So I don't know, was that last year or the year before? I think it might have been last year. I think they moved it this year, that the DRS detection zone for the third DRS zone is after that turn now. It's not before it, which they did this in I think Canada was the same thing. Canada the ones after, and I think that used to be before as well. They have 3 DRS zones. 2 of them are slightly curved, which is a bit weird, but and they're basically 1, 2, 3 after each other. It's hard to describe parts of this track that the overtakes will generally happen on that start finish straight. It's an exciting race to look at, I think, televisually. Safety cars are likely, just because if anything happens, getting someone off the track. It's like Monaco, even if they have a puncture, you're going to have a safety car to get that car out of
track limit stuff. Just a recurring feature.
You're right.
Especially at the end of that start finish straight.
Yes, and the whole turn 20 to 24. There's 27 numbered turns on this track as well, it should be mentioned. But the whole, there's a sort of a weird little pocket that they changed last year, which it's like there's a couple of blind turns here as well. It's a really wild track if you watch the onboard with folks. And there's a couple of spots where it's not runoff necessarily, but it's like the Singapore sling kind of stuff. You got a couple of like little turns that you can kind of half take or go over the curbs a bit too much, that type of thing. But yeah, it's produced interesting races in the past. But you kind of need the cars to be overtaking to do that. So I'm a little bit concerned that we might see a bit of a procession this weekend, unless a lot of people, unless the makeup of Bahrain in some way just really did not work for some of the cars, which may be the case. It is a high abrasion track,
Well, if you're disappointed in this Saudi Arabia track, fellas, I just posted a link in our Discord for the new Saudi Arabia track that is coming soon. Remember, we had initially gotten some weird renders. I think there was like a giant
fish
aquarium?
tank. The fish tank.
Yeah. It was an aquarium is maybe a better way of putting it. I think
feast your eyes on some new renders here that include the Blade.
Okay.
A high-speed corner that will rise and fall by a massive 108 meters.
Okay. This track seems to be, if they crash over the edge of this track, is that the track that's in the air?
I think so. It does look like a Mario Kart level.
Have they seen Mark Webber in Valencia?
Yeah.
I mean, have they seen Mark Webber anywhere in a Le Mans car?
Right.
Have they? Okay.
This feels like it's of a piece with all the Saudi bullshit, like Neom and the line city.
The line.
It like This ain't happening.
If you don't know what those are, by the way, well, how do you? The line is like a mega city that is like going to be like 100 miles long or some shit, and it's just one
Yeah,
big
it's
line.
like when look,
And then
Saudi
Neom
Arabia
like-
is run by a self-promoting
The Fire Festival
megalomaniac.
people?
Pardon?
Yeah, just a bunch. Yeah, a bunch
I
of
said
rich, bunch
yeah.
of rich fail sons, basically, who are just like throwing their stupid ideas.
Well, the meanest,
and all their
nastiest of
stupid
them, who
money.
famously had like a journalist like killed on his orders, is sort of
Yeah.
the guy steering the ship. But like one of the things that the kingdom does to sort of burnish its image as we are not just a repressive petrostate led by a violent narcissist, is look at these cool, like exciting ideas for the future that we have.
Yes,
We're going to build a city in the desert that's a big lot, like all sorts of shit
line.
like this.
imagine a city, but it's a line. All right, all right,
Sick.
cool. Now we're gonna build it.
For no fucking
Sounds
reason.
great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds like throwing out sort of like centuries of town planning. You know what I mean? Fuck it. Let's be legend.
Yeah.
Let's just
That's
make it so
progress,
that
Danny.
who needs a whole tube network when you can just have one train that runs the entire length of it? What could possibly go wrong?
So yeah, when I see this and it's like, is there even evidence that they've broken ground on anything here?
It's also these pictures are AI.
it's
Or have
pretty
some in them.
intense. Like it does look like it looks fake.
What did the driver say? Some of them said it looked like Mario Kart. I
They're
forget
right.
who was quoted at that. It was like
Well, we've got
Hamilton
some
or-
quotes here from Abdullah Aldawood, managing director of the Qiddiya Investment Company,
Great.
who says, "It's not just a venue. It's the culmination of our efforts to position Qiddiya City as the center of global motorsport."
Okay. Okay. Cool. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I'll
I-
put a
it-
link in the
there's
show
a
notes.
I don't know. There's a place where optimism meets arrogance, and it's all this stuff is just reminds me of those Chinese cities that were built and no one lives in them. It's just like this is not how you. And I don't know. I spent a lot of time in Dubai over the years. That place just there are smarter people than me who have written about it and talked about it, and it is a bizarre sort of byproduct of an insane amount of wealth being distributed to a very small family of people, and the insane end point of that, and how any of this stuff will last is a real, especially with like climate change. I wouldn't be building a fucking city in the hey, I guess if you're Saudi Arabian you can't exactly escape it, but it just seems particularly I don't know.
Well,
If-
let's
if-
get weird
Yeah, whatever.
in Jeddah this weekend because we've got looks like some more wind.
Ooh.
We're looking at, let's see, 8 p.m. local, 14 miles an hour out of the north on qualifying day, and 9 miles an hour out of the north on race day. 0 precipitation across the weekend, and looking like similar temperatures for qualifying the race, 77 Fahrenheit or 25 Celsius. So just balmy. Heading in to the race, we have the Drivers' Championship stacking up like this. Max Verstappen on top already with 26 points. Sergio Perez has 18. Carlos Sainz has 15. Charles Leclerc has 12. And George Russell is in 5th with 10. Followed by Lando Norris with 8. Lewis Hamilton with 6. Oscar Piastri with 4. Fernando Alonso with 2. And Lance Stroll in 10th with 1. Behind them, everybody has 0. That's Zhou Guanyu, Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, Nico Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly, Valtteri Bottas, and Logan Sargent. Constructor-wise, we have Red Bull Racing on top with 44 points. In second is Ferrari with 27. Mercedes is in third with 16 points. Then McLaren in fourth with 12. Aston Martin has 3 in fifth place. And then the zeros of Kick, Sauber, Ferrari. I'm just going to call them Sauber. Haas, Gino's own team. RB, Williams, and
I'm
Alpine.
coming around on V-carb.
V-carb.
I hate
carbs
it,
gotta
but
eat your carbs.
You can also join the standings yourself in the official Shift+F1 Fantasy League with a link in the show notes. Here's the podium for this weekend. In third, Bottas expected. In second, Old New Hampshire. And in first, RB River Road Racers
Nice.
with 302 points.
Yeah, I got 196, which...
Oh, so did I.
Did you? Did we
That's
have
the
the same
exact
team?
point number I have.
Do you know what your team is?
I do. Let me look at Welcome to Arby's here.
I have mine is Ricardo Bulls, like the Chicago Bulls as well. You know, puns are good when you have to explain.
I
them.
get it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got Verstappen, Ricardo.
Same.
Gasly.
Same.
Albon.
Same.
Tsunoda.
Same.
The teams Red Bull and RB.
Same.
What?
That's crazy.
Are you kidding me?
I am not joking. I'm not joking.
That's ridiculous.
That is absolutely mad. Holy shit.
Wow. We have known each other for way too long.
That is mad. Wow.
One of us doesn't even need to be here. We're the same person, it seems.
That's bizarre. You're slightly at a different order, but otherwise, Verstappen, Tsunoda, Ricardo, Albon, Gasly, Red Bull, and RB. Yeah,
that's too weird. I need to move on.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
if you want to send us an email with your own space-time bending coincidence, you can do so at shift1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials with the links in the show notes. That's us around the internet. Should we take it around the world, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
Formula 2 and the Formula 1 Academy are supporting Formula 1 this weekend in Jeddah. The Formula 1 Academy, this is the female racing series that I believe, I know that this is their first event.
Yes.
I haven't seen confirmation of this, but I assume it will be viewable on F1 TV. Maybe that's a bad assumption.
That was the problem in previous years.
I think they did not overlap any weekends last year, or if they did, it was just one. But now every weekend is, I think, overlapping with Formula 1. So hopefully that means the cameras are already there. Just turn them on. Let's watch some F1 Academy action.
Yes. Also, let's make access to driving for women in Saudi Arabia maybe a little bit easier. I mean, it's been decriminalized or whatever, but apparently it's still just an impossibly complicated and bureaucratically, intentionally impossible thing to do. So, stop fucking whitewashing for a second, maybe as well.
MotoGP is at the Lusail International Circuit in Doha, Qatar. Thank you, Danny. The NASCAR Xfinity Series is at the Phoenix Raceway in Avondale, Arizona. It was a little deceiving.
Nice.
For the call811.com every dig, period.
What?
Every time,
period.
200.
That's the gas lines, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I've lived in the country long enough to know that one. They have that shit everywhere. Don't dig. You don't know. It could be gas line. Yep. Boom. Phoenix is kind of the... or Avondale, maybe the Middle East, the Arabian desert of America. It's the hottest city in America, right? Phoenix is in summer.
The Motocross Grand Prix is in Argentina.
Ooh,
the
nice.
MXGP Patagonia, which is a cool name for an event.
Yeah.
IndyCar is on the streets of St. Pete for the Firestone Grand Prix of St. Petersburg in St. Petersburg, Florida.
That's the opener, is it? Am I crazy? Is that the opener or am I crazy?
Yeah.
I think
it
is
the opener.
Has Grosjean got a seat yet?
Oh, shit.
I don't know.
I don't think he had. Last week,
Malukas broke his wrist, and I think is being replaced by Callum Ilott.
Oh man,
Grosjean, I think, might have been focusing on Lamborghini sports car racing.
Okay. Man.
I think I have a better race name for you guys. This is the NHRA taking place in Gainesville, Florida, for the Amelie Motor Oil Gator Nationals.
Oh, fuck yes.
Like Amelie, like the French art house movie.
Yes, she's hawking motor oil.
Okay.
And Gator Nationals is one word.
What's Gator National? Is that a bank for Floridians?
I have no idea.
Great
Gator
news.
National.
Grosjean is driving for Juncos Hollinger in 2024.
Wait,
let's do it.
Wow. Okay. the Phoenix rises
and
once
might
more.
still be in a lawsuit
Avon
with Andretti. Not sure.
Great.
We've got Super Formula at Suzuka Circuit this weekend in the Mie Prefecture.
Oh. I looked up what Gator Nationals is. You need to know about this.
What is this?
The Gator Nationals is an annual National Hot Rod Association National Drag Race event. Did you look up the wrong NHRA? Was that it?
No, that's what I
That's
said.
what it is? It is always that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. I don't think I knew NHRA were hot rods this whole time.
Okay. Yeah,
I thought
it's
it
the
was something
National
else.
Hot Rod Association.
I did not know those are hot rods. You've been talking about them for literally 7 years.
Do we need to do a primer?
Yeah, maybe. Hot rods look cool.
I mean, you got your hot rods, you got your funny cars.
Do they also
Yeah.
do the tow events, or is that different motorsport?
Oh,
Like the
that's
tractor
cool.
pulls.
They're basically drag
Mate,
races.
come
With
with
the
me.
swamp buggies. Get the swamp buggies in here.
Dude, come to Ireland. Go to the farmers. What's it called? There's a farmers show every year, and they do all the tractor stuff. It's great fun. They're about to start up the racing on Adobe here in Petaluma in the next few weeks as well. So gotta come up, guys.
All right, finally we got NASCAR.
Oh my, here we go.
Also at the Phoenix Raceway for
Yeehaw.
the Shriners Children's 500.
We're 500 children. It's like a battle royale. We're putting 500 children. You know those kids for cars billboards? We got 500 cars. We're giving them to the kids. Let's see what
It's
happens.
a demo derby.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they're all driving in the wrong direction.
God, that'd be great.
Yeehaw.
That'd be like no more children commentary booths. Just children
No.
demo derbies. They'll have such a great time.
They would. Could you imagine?
Oh,
I would be.
People
I
would be
would
like,
delighted.
no, they're little bodies. They can't take the head trauma that would come from being a demolition derby, but like they love it.
Oh, they're supple. They've
They're
so
made of
many more
rubber.
bones.
Age 10,
Exactly.
12, 13. Yeah,
Bounce
they're
right off the
basically they're basically rubber.
Formula One also is happening this weekend. Thursday, March 7th is when things kick off. Free Practice 1 is at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN-U for you and me. Free Practice 2 is at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2. Friday, March 8th, Free Practice 3 starts at 8:30 a.m. On ESPN2, followed by qualifying at 12 noon on ESPN2. But the race, everyone, Saturday, March 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2. The Deuce.
It's a good time. Right in the morning.
It's the first Deuce of the year.
You love to see it.
Final thoughts, Danny. So much.
This was a lot of podcast. I feel like
Yeah.
it is going to age like a wet slice of bread in the wind. I think we are going to have more updates, probably, and I don't know. It just seems my worry. I'm hoping Jeddah is a good race. My worry, my fear, all of our worries and fears was we keep our optimism to the max when we're F1 fans, especially during times of dominance like we're stuck in at the moment. And the worry was that this year was going to be a procession. This year might be the most boring on track coupled with the most interesting telenovela off track we have ever seen. Again, I'm not downplaying anything, the seriousness of it, but
Danny, that's why Formula One's great, and it's why we're here.
it is. Who knows what happens at that? Does Max leave? Does Alonso take that seat? Anything's possible.
God.
Nothing. It's like I don't know. There's probably some allegory you can use for this, but it's like everything seems like it is locked in stone until it's like the Emperor's New Clothes until it isn't, and then anything is possible.
Yeah.
Like Lewis leaving to go to Ferrari was one of those moments.
Oh, it's the
If whatever happens with this
Red
situation,
Bull cratering? Yeah.
it's the domino meme. Except
it
that
is.
seemed huge, right? That's the funny thing is the first domino here was enormous. Was Lewis decides to go to Ferrari, and you would think that'd be, the end of the story. But if it's turned into, it's going to cause the entire Red Bull F1 program to implode. That's wild.
It's a whole season of silly.
But
Drive to
here's
Survive, people are losing their minds right now.
and this is my final thoughts. Like I kind of live for this stuff, but man, if it is an entire season of them playing Game of Cans over at Red Bull, and it centers
Yeah.
on just weaponized harassment allegations that like never get dealt with in any kind of like air
Yeah.
clearing manner. That's gonna be the grimmest fucking part of this.
100%.
Is like the sport. This stuff will only come to light when there's a political axe to grind at a company, and even then, because of that, it's just gonna completely freeze any ability to reckon with what actually happened here. And the new regulations come in 2026. Is there anything that's going to stop the never-ending silly season from, like, what if we're just in for 2 years of F1 being kind of frozen and just everything kind of waiting for like the next act to begin, and everyone's just sort of free to go, just go buck wild in terms of the politicking, in terms of positioning for the future. It just feels like the weirdest time I've seen in F1. And like, as you know, we talked about in the Hulu documentary about Braun, we've seen the sport nearly tear itself apart in the last like 15 years. Right now it kind of feels weirder. Like things are on hold, and there's a lot of teams I feel like with not enough to do that decided, like, from sheer ennui, what if we all turned against each other and started eating each other instead?
Speaking of weird, did you guys notice that the second track article I shared from Autosport doesn't have a byline?
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels like this is SpawnCon, but it's not marked as SpawnCon.
It really does, but it's just the tag on it is general. So your mileage may
Things
vary.
are going fine at Autosport, folks. Your
Everything
subscription
is cool.
money is being well spent and augmented by some people with access to Photoshop.
What news was that? The Mario Kart one?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I wanted this too. I was like, because this didn't feel.
The headline is "Game-changing Saudi Arabia venue set to push the boundaries of motorsports."
Somebody just hacked into their CMS and just posted it.
It's
all right.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good.
It's gonna be weird, everyone.
Almost
I hope you join
podcast.
us.
Let's get out of here.
I hope you help us get through this. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.